Go Home is an anthology put out by the Feminist Press and the Asian American Writers Workshop. It features 24 artists that are pulled from the Asian diaspora, which is a wild and far-ranging thing. Editor Rowan Hiseo Buchanan herself is born in London of a hodgepodge European father and a mother, second generation born in New York with parents originally from Tokyo and Shanghai. So this collection is as much for her as it is for my daughter, who's third generation Dutch, German, Korean. The anthology is culled from over 500 submissions from writers who come originally from countries as far-ranging as the Philippines, Syria, Singapore, Korea, Japan, China, Nepal, India, and more.
So, are you Chinese or Japanese?
Ugh. Anthologies can be hit or miss. There's a ton of variance as to what's put on the page, but that's part of its appeal. Anthologies have that opportunity to introduce you to things that you wouldn't normally otherwise encounter. But this collection felt immediately familiar, and it's helped by the fact that it's bookended by two Korean authors that are important to me. It opens with Release by Alexander Chee. He is famously the author of Queen of the Night, which I loved and reviewed on this channel. Chee's got an effortless style, and I'm really looking forward to his collection of essays coming out later this month called How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. And it closes with Chang-Rae Lee's The Faintest Echo of Our Language, and I was surprised by how thrilled I was to see the Korean language anglicized there on the page. I mean, I am not fluent in the language by any stretch of the imagination, but I do recognize a few words, and it was really awesome to see those on the page, even if it was in the childlike language that Chang-Rae Lee outlines. And it just struck a chord. It reminded me of my youth growing up and that secret language of home, all those words I grew up with, like bakenaga, shiksaheo, and iriwa. The story is also significant because Chang-Rae Lee represents the first Korean author writing in English that I ever read back in '95 with his native speaker. Since then, thanks to the larger bookish community that is BookTube, I've been introduced to a whole host of other Korean authors, not the least of which including Min-jin Lee, Paul Yoon, Patty Yumi Cottrell, Yoon-ha Lee, Mary H.K. Che, Patricia Park, Jun Young, Eugene Grace Wertz, and now I can add Alice Sola Kim to the roster. Her story, Mothers Lock Up Your Daughters Because They Are Terrifying, originally appeared in Monstrous Affections, an anthology of beastly tales, but it is easily my favorite thing in this entire collection. It, like White Tears and Lovecraft Country, marries horror with an examination of race. Here, the story of three Korean adoptees and their paranormal ajumma. It's awesome, and I cannot wait for Alice Sola Kim's debut novel. What's interesting about this collection is that it also features poetry. And it can be a little jarring making that transition from short story fiction to poetry. I still find poetry a little intimidating. It feels like I really need to slow down and consider every carefully selected word. It is high-test reading, concentrated sentences, but I still really enjoyed the poem Bun Chol Koo and the Hall of Fame by Jason Koo. In the poem, Jason is writing the all-American novel about baseball, and so he decides to make the pilgrimage to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York with his father. He's there to see the bats of Ruth, Gehrig, and DiMaggio, and he recalls growing up around baseball. When he was born in New York, his parents cheered the New York Yankees, and later on, when he was growing up in Cleveland, he would beg to stay up, listen to the Cleveland Indians play out on the radio in the kitchen, and he'd want to stay to the very last pitch, even though it was clear sometimes that it was just a rout. It's an American pastime of a life lived entirely in the United States, and yet Jason can't help but see himself through the eyes of a passing car as he and his father stand outside of the building. They are just simply two Asians with a camera. It reminded me of another poem earlier in the collection by Mohea Neff called My Grandmother Washes Her Feet in the Sink at the Bathroom at Sears. And it speaks to all of us second-generation kids who often found ourselves forced to navigate these two vastly opposing worlds. She has another poem in the collection called Ramadan, Red, White, and Blue, which is totally rock and roll, and it speaks to how hardcore and hard it is to celebrate Ramadan in the United States as opposed to the old country. Ramadan USA, hardcore and hungry, the old prophet way. This collection is a total grab bag, but not in the plain paper bag of candy from the corner store sort of way where they're just trying to offload their unsold treats, their recently expired candies, and stuff they swept off the floor, but more in the loot box sort of way, filled with all kinds of awesome stuff you didn't even realize you needed in your life, and maybe the odd thing you'll never look at again. Now, I have to say, I'm not exactly sold on the binding principle of go home for the anthology. Even Viet Thanh Nguyen, who writes the foreword, cops out and says language is a home to all, which doesn't exactly narrow down the parameters of your anthology. But regardless, I really enjoyed it, and I think you should check it out. I'm done filming this. We'll see if I can actually get it out in time. My Mac has been beach balling all week long ever since I upgraded to High Sierra, and if I was more conspiratorially minded, I would say this is just a ploy from Apple to get me to upgrade my machine, although it clearly is a ploy from Apple to get me to upgrade my machine. But IT issues aside, I hope you all have a great week of reading, and we will talk to you soon.